Solar PV Cast by Shift, a podcast exploring solar energy and the role it plays in improving our lives and our planet. Here's your host, Chris Palliser.
If you're going to talk about solar, well, you're going to have to talk about being energy efficient. The two just go hand in hand. Yes, it is the Solar PV Cast. My name is Chris. It is brought to you by Shift. For all your solar and energy storage needs, make sure you visit shift.ca. Now, like I said, when you're talking about solar, you have to talk about efficiency because really at the end of the day, if we all just use less energy, you need to buy less panels and everybody wins. The environment, your pocketbook, it's just a win-win-win. So there's one person I can think of that is very knowledgeable when it comes to energy efficiency and solar, partly because he's the chair of the board of Solar Nova Scotia and also manager energy management services for Efficiency Nova Scotia. I'd like to welcome to the podcast Mr. Dave Brushett. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for having me on. I really happy to be here, and I love your podcast, and it was great seeing your podcast at the Solar Summit this year. So,
yeah, really, that was a really fun. If you didn't know, if you're listening or watching, we got to do some live streaming of the podcast from the Atlantic Canada Solar Summit in Halifax in December. And we tried to get you on, Dave, but obviously one of your busiest days, no doubt, running around that event. So we made sure to make it happen this year. Yeah, how did you think the event went?
I thought it was great. I thought it was the best one yet. And so we've been doing it for a number of years now, and it's grown every year. And it's just a really great time for the hundreds of people that are now working in this sector in the region to get together and learn and build connections. We always hold it in December, so it's just a good opportunity to really look back at, the past year and where things are going. And like the solar industry in Nova Scotia has been growing every year for a decade. And so there's always, every year, it's just, there's more going on. There's more people, there's new faces. And so it's a really positive event.
Yeah, and you have been a part of that change. I mean, you posted actually yesterday, I thought it was really cool, about how in 2007, when you graduated from Dalhousie, the landscape of energy in Nova Scotia was kind of here, 80% coal, the brain drain. You talked about all the engineers heading off to Alberta to do the oil and gas. And so for you to kind of stand at this Atlantic Canada Solar Summit event and look around, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it's just like it kind of blows my mind a little bit how far the industry has come since back then. So yeah, like when I graduated engineering in 2007, we were really heading into like the big recession, lots of job losses. And yeah, it was a really major issue where all of our engineering graduates and trades were just seeing more opportunity in Alberta than they were seeing in Nova Scotia. At the time, we were very heavily reliant on coal for our electricity production, all imported. All of the heating in Nova Scotia pretty much at that time was oil. And just my interest in renewable energy and energy efficiency had been sparked during school. And so I really thought like there's a really good opportunity here for Nova Scotia, sort of empower people to take sort of an active role in their energy futures. But at that time, it wasn't really clear to me like how you would actually pursue a career in this industry because it wasn't really, I think, a mainstream thing for an engineering graduate to do.
Almost didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
Yeah.
And just like the idea that I was going to kind of have a career in energy efficiency, like I've had some people advising me against it. Like that just wasn't a smart move. But I think I really believed in kind of the long term that this is going to be great for Nova Scotia. It's going to create a lot of opportunities for trades and engineering grads to stay here and build their lives in Nova Scotia. And I think really that's what we've seen over the last 2 decades here. And so it gives me a lot of satisfaction.
Well, and again, the Atlantic Solar Summit is a product of Solar Nova Scotia, and that has been the drive and the passion of this nonprofit group since it was early 80s. It was founded. We actually had Dan McKay, I believe, who was one of the founders at the pub lunches, I think it was initially how it all started. And so for you to kind of line up with that organization, you guys have done an incredible amount of firsts. Where does that drive come from? Is it just people with like minds wanting to make it happen? Because you guys are almost leading the country with this organization.
Yeah, I think Nova Scotia has been a leader in solar energy for a long time. There have just been certain people like involved at Dalhousie University that have really kind of been pushing this. There was actually two of my past professors at Dal have been involved with Solar Nova Scotia at various times. And one of them actually invited me to be on the board when I joined. I think it's been like 9 years now. But yeah, I think Nova Scotians in general are really kind of believe in kind of being stewards of the environment. And there's like great universities here. And I think there's just been a lot of interest. We have great renewable resources as a province, from our wind energy to like the Bay of Fundy for tidal, solar. And so, yeah, I think that's where, like back then, it was mainly about solar thermal. And there was actually a local company in Nova Scotia called Thermodynamics who was manufacturing solar thermal systems. And they were one of the few companies, I think, in Canada kind of manufacturing like solar at that time. And yeah, those were great systems. And I learned about those in school. Like he would have us design the systems as part of the class. Like, so we would be designing the heat exchangers. In another class I had with him, we would be developing a spreadsheet and doing like PV calculations before we had kind of like software that helps us with it. So yeah, I think I really attribute it to kind of being exposed to it at Dalhousie. There's a really great opportunity here, and it's amazing how far things have come. So,
what was the spark for you? I know for me, it was I saw a video on solar roadways. It was just something in the US, and that's when I first was like, solar? Tell me more about this. Wait, we can use that ball of fire in the sky? Was there a moment for you, a video, a conversation that really ignited this passion?
So I think my initial spark with renewable energy was going to university in Wolfville at Acadia. So in Nova Scotia, you can do your first couple of years at Acadia and then finish at Dal. And so Wolfville, I don't know if you're familiar with Wolfville at all, but it's this beautiful town on the Bay of Fundy. And the Bay of Fundy was very fascinating to me because it has the largest tides in the world. It has more water that flow in and out every tide cycle. I think it's 160 billion tons. Than all of the flow of all the rivers in the world combined. So it's right. And so like when you drive to Wolfville, you come over this hill and basically you see this big scene with like the Blomidon Cliffs, and it's all like, it looks like you're looking at the ocean. And then if you do the same thing later in the day, like it's all mud as far as the eye can see. Wow. And so I was really interested in the idea of using that tidal power to produce electricity for Nova Scotia. There had been a tidal project in another community in the Annapolis Valley. I think it was, not sure what year it was, but it was like a 20 megawatt sort of system. Right. And so there was a lot of interest from like researchers at Acadia in the potential of kind of tapping into that power. So incredible. I think that was what first got me interested. When I was at Dal, I mentioned that I had some exposure with some of my classes. And I did the co-op program at Dal, and I actually had the opportunity to do one of my internships at a university in the Netherlands. And this was back in 2005. And I was doing research on solar energy. And at that time, they were looking to use it to power portable consumer electronics. I was teaching a lab there at that university. So that was well before kind of like solar PV really took off here. Yeah. But I was kind of exposed to it way back then.
Well, Europe is ahead of us when it comes to solar for sure. So you kind of saw the future and what could be in Nova Scotia.
Exactly. And so I was very much interested in energy efficiency and renewable energy when I graduated. But like I said, like it just, there wasn't an obvious opportunity to get into the industry, and it was kind of niche. Um, at that time, like I mentioned, it was the Great Recession. The price of oil was just spiking really hard, and I think it went up to like $150 a barrel in 2008. And where Nova Scotia was really kind of heavily reliant on heating oil, um, there was an opportunity to kind of do energy audits and recommend energy efficiency opportunities to. I was working with multi-unit residential buildings primarily, and there were some federal programs that were meant to kind of stimulate the economy to kind of build some jobs, and so that's where I really started off, is just like doing energy audits. I got to talk to so many different Nova Scotians during that time period, and just kind of, it was a really kind of like transformative period for me, just to kind of learn about this opportunity and understand that Nova Scotians want this to happen, but for whatever reason it's not. And so
That's
they
interesting.
kind of need somebody to turn the goals into action, basically.
Yeah. So through these conversations, you could tell there was already a desire. Hey,
it was a huge, yeah, like Nova Scotians wanted it. Like we have our electric utility, Nova Scotia Power, like it was 80% coal, and then the rest was oil and natural gas, and it was all imported. And we have these amazing resources. Like we have the best wind energy in North America.
I'm Googling Bay of Fundy and hydro, like electricity, like after this immediately.
Yeah. And actually the Bay of Fundy is one that it hasn't really panned out. Like I would have thought back then that it, by now it would be really like lots of power generation, but it's just, it's a little too powerful, and like the turbines, they can't handle how powerful it is. So
right. Yeah.
I'm hoping like new like innovation in like material science in the future will help sort of unlock that.
What about those that's like tidal, that would be waves, those big drums that you see floating up and down. But like you said,
they have some floating projects. There's what's called the FORCE. It's the Fundy Ocean Research Center for Education or something like that. Right, and they've done a bunch of like different like pilot, just to figure out what's going to work there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, where there's a will, there's a way, and you've clearly shown that. You know, what are the numbers now? So when you graduated 2007, we talked about mostly coal. Oil was $150 a barrel. What are the numbers now in Nova Scotia?
Like our electricity has like really like, it's been a lot of different people who have been involved, but like I think a lot of credit goes to Nova Scotia Power, but you know, we're primarily renewable now. Like there's still coal, but there's a plan to phase it out by 2030. And so there's been a lot of wind development. There's hydro that's being imported from Newfoundland now, and solar. Like we just reached our 10,000th solar installation last year, up from like virtually zero. Yeah, like a decade earlier.
Wow.
And then like in terms of like the heating system, like I think oil, like the use of oil in heating systems has gone down by like 75% or something like that. I think like, wow, really Nova Scotians have embraced like heat pumps. Yeah. Natural gas in the center of Halifax, but outside of Halifax, there's no natural gas.
Incredible.
So
I was there for the Atlantic Canada Solar Summit and in December, and the first thing that hit me was the amount of solar panels on residential homes. Like just driving from the airport to downtown, I can't remember the name of it now, but there's a street and there's like 2 or 3 homes, neighbors, just boom, boom, boom. And it's incredible to see. And Solar Nova Scotia has been a massive part of that. Talk a little bit about Solar Nova Scotia. Now, there's a volunteer just from people that are passionate about solar.
Yeah, so Solar Nova Scotia, we basically do a few different things. Like we've over the years, we've transformed from more of like I would call it more of like a hobbyist, like a grassroots, like people who are just interested in the technology.
It was the pub lunches.
What's that?
That was the pub lunches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so now we've found ourselves like more like as an industry association now, really helping to advocate on behalf of our members. We saw the importance of that with I'm not sure how familiar your listeners would be, but in 2022, there was a proposed system access charge by the utility that was kind of proposed to the UARB, and it had just like a chilling effect on the industry, like basically like shut down, because it would have resulted in like homeowners who have net metering to pay like a monthly charge to access the grid, which would have just kind of ruined the economics of solar. So, but we were there as an organization to push back, and like I think at that time it became very obvious that like the solar industry is a lot of small businesses, and there's decisions being made by the utility and the UARB that have a big impact, so they need a seat at the table, and so we're there to advocate for them. But we also do events like the Solar Summit to bring people together. We've done a number of initiatives to help with public education around solar. So we did an initiative called the Discover Solar, where we did these free presentations in about 60 different communities across Nova Scotia, where we would have a presenter who basically like talked to whoever wanted to come for a couple hours about solar and how the economics work and how the technology works and what are the environmental impacts.
We also so important.
So that was really well received. We did. We've done initiatives to basically train the industry, and we've also done like research from time to time when there's something where the solar industry could benefit from our research. So before the establishment of the provincial solar incentive in Nova Scotia, we did a study called the Atlantic Canada Solar Study. And we looked at kind of what is the pricing and productivity, like what is the currently the ability of the supply chains, and what is the ability of companies to install solar. And that work we provided to the province helped inform the solar incentive that really helped kind of transform things. So those are some of the things we do. And we're really just like the Solar Summit, there's a lot of enthusiasm from like our members and the wider community here in Halifax. So it's been great to see.
Yeah.
We've actually had engagement recently with a new organization that has started in New Brunswick, Solar New Brunswick. And I think they were inspired by the work of Solar Nova Scotia. And so we helped advise them and encourage them. And I recently had the opportunity to present at their founding meeting earlier this year. So,
I mean, shout out to you guys. That I know you touched on it, but you're literally in the ear of the premier of Nova Scotia. They're looking at this organization for advice because that's the way the government wants to move. And so kudos to you guys for that. And of course, kudos to you guys for the education, because when you're not in the industry like we are, you tend to forget that there's a lot of people that think solar is the person with the tinfoil hat who lives by themselves up in the mountains. And it's not that way. And as we move along this adoption curve, organizations like Solar Nova Scotia are vital and to help educate the public. So I think that's wonderful that you're doing all that. And like you said, to stand at the Atlantic Canada Solar Summit and look around and bringing people together is a big part of moving this industry forward. Yeah.
On the public education piece, we have this Facebook discussion group, which is it now has, I think, like somewhere between 6,000 and 6,500 members. And there's a lot of discussions there. There's a lot of that's really a go-to place for somebody who's interested in solar to go and ask questions of other people who have experience. And there's also kind of like installers that'll answer your question there. So,
well, it can be intimidating too for a lot of people, right? Like this is a relatively new technology, and it can be intimidating. So kind of knocking a few barriers down and creating that safe space. And I was just going to say, talking about New Brunswick there, have any other provincial groups reached out to you? Obviously, you just mentioned New Brunswick, but you are leading.
Yeah. Well, we've had discussions with Solar Quebec. We have a partnership with Solar Alberta, and I was invited recently by Efficiency PEI to come and speak to their installers, likely happen at some point this year, about kind of like forming their association. And actually we have kind of now we're working with CanREA, and we have kind of a meeting with kind of national solar stakeholders coming up. So yeah, like we're
Incredibly
very
exciting.
we don't consider them competitors. Like we're happy to help like these types of associations form in other provinces. Like we all have similar goals. Just want to see kind of more activity, and so yeah.
What do you think? What do you think of? I always have this conversation with people, and I do want to talk about efficiencies. Come up a few times, and that is a big part of solar. And I know that's big in your world too. But just your thoughts on the conversation with people about solar, because every time somebody says to me, "What's the ROI? What am I getting out of this?"
Yeah.
I'm just like, you don't ask that when you buy your car. You don't ask that when you pave your driveway. You don't ask that when you do a $50,000 bathroom reno. Why is it such an uphill battle when it's like you're collecting power from the sun? I don't know what more you want here. Yes, value of your home increases. Yes, you do get paid back. What do you think around that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, so, like, I think in Nova Scotia in
Marketing?
particular,
Oil company
yeah,
marketing?
I mean, I think Nova Scotia really is very well suited for solar because our electricity is still relatively not clean based on kind of like other jurisdictions like BC, and it is relatively expensive, and so there is a good ROI on solar, and so yeah, I guess
But like, I guess people want an ROI with solar. It's like when you
yeah,
just went out and bought your giant whatever for your house, you never ask your ROI or perimeter drains. I had to do those.
yeah,
And
yeah.
okay, my basement doesn't flood. That helps my home. That's great. But why is it such an uphill battle with this solar
Yeah,
conversation?
yeah. No, I mean it is, but I tend to think like, well, like if that's the angle you're coming at, like there is a good ROI. So let's kind of
Totally.
explain
Yeah,
how that
yeah.
works. So, yeah,
Yeah, and when there is a great ROI, and that's why solar's booming, because those costs are coming down. It's making a
yeah,
lot of sense.
yeah,
But efficiency, that's at the base of it all. And I
yeah,
always look back to this one story. I was chatting with a couple that went solar with Shift, and I
yeah,
said, "Oh, what's your offset?" And they said, "Well, when we signed, it was 80%. 80% was solar, and 20% we got hydro." And I said, and this was a year, I said, "Oh, how about now?" And they said, "Now we're 100% solar," because they were so motivated by the
yeah,
app that they were like,
yep,
"Oh, we're going to use less energy." And now we're
yeah.
100%. Talk a little bit about and the role that efficiency plays and has played in the solar journey in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been working in energy efficiency primarily for the last 2 decades, and it's really where like I'm really my interest. If you were to kind of just like very simply, it's really helping with the demand side of the electricity system, helping homes and businesses really kind of pursue solutions on the demand side, which often have good value to the system as a whole. And so I work now with Efficiency One. Before that, I was working. There was an organization called Conserve Nova Scotia that was the provincial government, and I was working for a delivery agent for some of their programs. Efficiency One was a real game changer when it was established in 2010, and it was set up as it's not part of the government. It's independent, and it's an energy efficiency utility. And so they're able to sell negative electricity to Nova Scotia Power, and there's a value put on it because that allows Nova Scotia Power to not have to build new generating infrastructure. So really kind of established a value for efficiency, and really that helped
Oh,
sort of the energy efficiency industry flourish in Nova Scotia. But yeah, the organization is called Efficiency One because it's like efficiency is the first thing you should look at doing. And then once you
right.
make your house efficient, then kind of put solar on and produce the rest of your energy that way.
So Efficiency One is a part of Efficiency Nova Scotia, or is it a name change? Just catch me up there.
it's used interchangeably.
Okay,
Yeah, Efficiency One is kind of the parent. Efficiency
got
Nova
it.
Scotia is the
Okay,
franchise in Nova Scotia, and there's some
okay.
other sort of sister companies to Efficiency. Nova Scotia
What?
as well.
And I believe efficiency one and this idea of efficiency and assigning value to it, this is a first in Canada, right? This doesn't exist anywhere else.
It's the first in Canada. And it was actually like based on a model from Vermont. So there was an organization called Efficiency Vermont, and they, I think, were really the first ones to do it. And there was a lot of kind of collaboration. I think they helped us with the idea of doing this here. And but yeah, it was a very innovative. It was a very innovative solution, and I think like there's been like $4 billion worth of savings.
Wow.
I think like somewhere between, I think like 15% of all electricity usage has been kind of removed due to kind of energy efficiency. So
yeah, because that's what it's all about, right? We just be more efficient in all parts of our lives.
Exactly.
What are some, we've kind of talked about the beginning and the middle and the future in a second. What are some highlights that really stick out for you in your personal journey with Solar Nova Scotia and efficiency one?
Yeah, so like I think like the situation in 2022 I mentioned with the system access charge was really pivotal, and we were able to advocate for some really great changes that ended up happening. So there was actually a lot of good that came out of that, and so at that point we worked with the province, and they raised the net metering cap from 100 kilowatts to 1 megawatt, which really opened up kind of more larger installations, more commercial activity. They also created the right to solar that's now part of our Electricity Act, where every Nova Scotian has the right to put solar on their house and get compensated for the energy they put on the grid. So there's no program that could be canceled. The utility doesn't really have the utility can't stop you from doing it. And so that's something that's really kind of unique here in Nova Scotia. That's community solar program is something we've been encouraging, and that just launched last year. And so that's
what was that one?
The community solar program.
Oh,
yeah. So that's sort of enabling more large scale community installations up to 10 megawatts, where Nova Scotians can subscribe to a solar garden. And so those are some like I would say
great.
Yeah,
those are big wins, and it's pretty incredible to see that solar is taken seriously in Nova Scotia, and unfortunately, there's parts of the world south of the border where renewables are taking a bit of a hit right now. But to solar, I love that.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have a right? It's your home, it's your land. Yeah. You should have a right to get your energy how you want.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure how many Nova Scotians know about that, but yeah, we are trying to educate people. But that's something that I think was a really great change that was brought in. So
yeah, wonderful. What about the future? What about the future for Solar Nova Scotia? You personally, you going shopping this weekend?
So the future, like Nova Scotia has come a long way since I got into the industry. It's been very exciting to see, and there's a lot of great stuff that's on the go here. Lots of new like wind energy developments, all these new community solar gardens. Nova Scotians are embracing solar. Batteries. I'm very excited about kind of the future of batteries here in Nova Scotia. Especially like right now on the commercial side, there's starting to be a business case for batteries, and Efficiency Nova Scotia has a demand response program, which allows you to basically help support the grid when the grid is facing its peaks, so that it can meet those loads, and then you can get compensated for doing that. So starting to be a business case for batteries. And
exciting.
The cost of batteries is coming down similar to the way the cost of solar came down.
Yeah.
I think it's come down by like 90% over the last like decade or so. So a lot of
incredible.
There. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, speaking to batteries, we're seeing it in the United States, which is kind of our crystal ball. And so you're starting to see adoption more in Nova Scotia, hey?
Yeah, I mean, it's very early stages on what I would call the customer-sited batteries, where you would have a battery like on the same site as a business or a homeowner. But Nova Scotia Power just launched a procurement last year for 3 50 megawatt batteries, like really huge batteries. And so that was awarded to eStorage, who were presenting at the Solar Summit. They had a great presentation. So, and Nova Scotia has a lot of battery expertise. And so Dalhousie has a really well-known like battery researcher called Jeff Don, who has done a lot of instrumental work in the development of lithium-ion batteries. And so I think, and then we actually have a company in Nova Scotia that manufactures batteries called Surrett Battery. So they're a member of Solar Nova Scotia. So we're in the very early stages of kind of the customer-sited battery. I think one of the key things will be like enabling them to provide services to the grid and get compensated for that. But I do think as the cost continues to come down, there's going to be a lot of potential there, and that also helps create more potential for solar, because you could sort of build more solar and store it in your battery, and then that works out really well. So.
Still net metering in Nova Scotia, because BC's moving to net billing. Is that going? Is there a change coming? Or like where's Nova Scotia on that whole?
Yeah, so Nova Scotia right now is a 1-for-1 sort of net metering, and no change that I'm aware of. And we're happy with the program as it is right now. So
yeah, great. Wonderful. I feel like we could keep going. You're incredibly knowledgeable on solar and efficiency and renewable energy in general. This is Dave Brushett, manager of Energy Management Services for Efficiency One and chair of the board of Nova Scotia. Final thoughts from you, Dave, on solar in general?
Maybe I'll just put in a plug for the 2025 Atlantic Canada Solar Summit at the Halifax Convention Centre early December. We're going to be launching a call for presenters in the coming weeks. And so if you have like exciting like technology, cool projects you're working on, like that's a great opportunity to get it out there. And I would invite all your listeners to come from all over Canada. It's not just for Atlantic Canada. So
we had Zach from oh my gosh, it's escaping me. Solar Carports. He gave a speech.
Yeah. I talked to him at the summit. Yeah, that's really cool. Like
so we had him on last week.
Yeah. They're kind of able to produce them at like a lower cost by like prefabricating them. So I thought that was really cool.
100%. Well, Dave, thanks again for taking the time to join the Solar PV Cast. And I think right now we're penciled in to be live streaming again from the Solar Summit.
Awesome.
I think it's wonderful.
Should be a great event. And looking forward to seeing you there. So
thanks for your time.
Thank you.
The Solar PV Cast by Shift with Chris Palliser. To begin your solar journey, visit shift.ca.